What if everything you've been told about saturated fat and cholesterol is wrong? Because the research now shows it's not the saturated fat in your diet that raises cholesterol, it's the carbohydrates, especially sugar. If you're doing keto or carnivore, this changes everything. Let me show you the data nobody talks about. Hi, I'm Mark Bates. I'm your metabolic health coach, and today's topic is the relationship between saturated fat, cholesterol, and carbohydrate intake. Okay, so why saturated fat does not cause cholesterol problems? So dietary saturated fat intake is not directly linked to increased blood cholesterol levels. Multiple large studies and meta-analysis have shown that eating saturated fat does not necessarily raise cholesterol in the blood, and the old belief that saturated fat causes heart disease by elevating cholesterol is being completely reassessed. Right? So, saturated fat circulating in the blood is a risk factor, definitely. But dietary intake does not equate to blood levels. In fact, ketogenic or low-carb diets, despite high saturated fat consumption, often reduce blood saturated fat levels because the body burns saturated fat more efficiently for fuel. The body prefers to burn saturated fat when carbohydrate intake is low. This leads to lower circulating saturated fat in blood and tissues, reducing potential harm. There is no known biochemical mechanism by which saturated fat intake increases LDL cholesterol. Yes, you heard me right. There is no known biochemical mechanism by which saturated fat intake increases LDL cholesterol. Some studies even show that supplementation with saturated fat sources like coconut oil can lower cholesterol levels. So, how about how carbohydrates influence cholesterol and saturated fat levels then? So carbohydrate intake is a key determinant of blood saturated fat levels. High carbohydrate consumption leads to increased de novo lipogenesis. That's the conversion of carbs into fat, which raises saturated fat in the blood. Carbohydrates, especially refined sugars and fructose, increase triglycerides and worsen HDL cholesterol, which are important markers of cardiovascular risk. High carbohydrate intake is associated with higher risk of total mortality and adverse blood lipid profiles, whereas saturated fat intake is not associated with increased cardiovascular disease risk and even predict lower stroke risk. So there are health impacts for individuals on ketogenic or carnivore diets. If you're on the ketogenic or carnivore diets, which are typically very low in carbohydrates, if zero carbohydrate altogether, and are very high in fats, including high amounts of saturated fats, right? Because you're eating red meat, for example. So despite this high saturated fat intake, these diets often lead to lower blood saturated fat levels due to increased fat oxidation, improved markers of metabolic health, such as reduced triglycerides, increased HDL cholesterol, and decreased insulin resistance, reduction in inflammation biomarkers, which is beneficial for cardiovascular health. So those are all great things. Some individuals on ketogenic or carnivore diets may experience elevated LDL cholesterol, but this is not necessarily harmful. The rise in LDL may be influenced more by genetics. For example, I have this as well. I have familial hypercholesterolemia, which means I have high levels of LDL as a general rule. Or your body composition, how lean you are, rather than saturated fat intake itself. Cholesterol is essential for cell membrane integrity, hormone synthesis, and other vital functions. So having high cholesterol is not necessarily bad for you. And the liver does more to regulate its production based on the body's needs than anything you could eat. Dietary cholesterol intake has little effect on blood cholesterol levels, but carbs definitely have a negative effect. So the implications for you. For those following ketogenic or carnivore diets, concerns about saturated fat causing cholesterol problems are largely unfounded, if not completely unfounded. The body adapts to burn saturated fat efficiently, preventing its accumulation in blood and tissues. Carbohydrate restriction is a more effective strategy to improve blood lipid profiles and reduce cardiovascular risks than simply reducing saturated fat intake. Monitoring individual responses is still important, as some people may have genetic predispositions affecting cholesterol metabolism. So personalized assessment is preferable to a blanket dietary restriction. This nuanced understanding helps explain why ketogenic and carnivore diets, despite being high in saturated fat, can improve metabolic health and reduce inflammation, while high carbohydrate intake can worsen blood lipid profiles and increase cardiovascular risk. Okay, if you've enjoyed that, please like and share this video and think about subscribing to the channel. It helps us a great deal. Thank you. Also, check out the description. There's a link to my metabolic health platform. It's $10 a month. You get access to all the videos, plus a lot of details that I can't provide on YouTube, as well as many more videos than I release to YouTube. And the biggest one is we do have two things you probably want to have access to. One, we do host live Q&A sessions where you can ask any question you want, and we record those so that you can get to them if you need to. And the second thing is there's a community then here where you can ask questions, and I will do my best to give you a complete answer, but also there will be other people there who can give you their perspectives on everything. So build this community out. It will help you. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, leave me a comment. Thank you.